Chapter 3, Hannah. Seth's best friend is a junior named Connor, so to get closer to Seth, I said hi to Connor twice today in passing. He looked pleasantly surprised the first time and said hi back the second. This is progress. Then Connor just happened to be outside my English class when I got out and walked me to my locker. We passed Seth, and I really didn't like the looks they gave each other, like a thumbs up from Seth to Connor that he was walking with me. This is not good. Later on, I dodged Connor by changing hall routes and ran into Seth in the courtyard by himself. There was no way I could just go up to him, and so I headed over to my regular spot on the curb, and he said, teasing, "What, you don't want to talk to me?" So I went over, and it turned out he was getting high and offered me weed, but I lied and said, "No, it gives me hives. Weed at school. Right, like my mother wouldn't rip my head off and take it bowling if I ever got caught getting high at school, especially a school my father keeps wondering if he can afford to keep me in. No, I'm not losing my chance at Seth just for that." Anyhow, Seth said something about Connor, like he was trying to find out if I liked him, and I said, he's okay, because I didn't want to talk stupid Connor. I wanted to make him like me. He finished getting high and said, "Come on, let's go into the cafeteria. I need something to drink." I really didn't want to lose my chance alone with him, but what could I say? So we went, with him being silly and messing my hair up on purpose, and me walking slow to make it last and praying nobody was in the cafeteria, but of course Connor was, along with a bunch of others. So what did imbecile Seth do? Brought me right over to Connor, and with a big dorky grin said, "Don't ever say I never gave you anything." And then he went to sit at a different table with stupid senior Nutria Sorrel, who had great blonde bedhead, but also wicked knock-knees, and also, although nobody seemed to realize it but me, a name that meant a giant swamp-dwelling, orange-toothed rodent. What a stupid day. Gran called earlier, my mother said, when I dragged myself into the back door and dumped my books on the kitchen table. She said to tell you that she's picking the green tomatoes tonight, so you should be there by 6. "Well, I can't go tonight," I muttered, peeling off my coat and slinging it across the back of a chair. "Why not?" my mother said. "Because I already made plans," I said, opening the fridge and hanging on the door. "Why don't we ever have anything good to eat?" "Eat a banana," my mother said. "I hate bananas," I said, scowling and closing the refrigerator. "You better call Gran and tell her you're not coming," my mother said. "Don't just leave her waiting, Hannah. She counts on you." "I know I won't," I said, and grabbing my purse, headed up to my room, but I did because I knew she would try to talk me into coming, but I didn't want to go, and that made me feel guilty. I mean, I picked the tomatoes with her every year, and yes, I love the steamy scent of hot vinegar steeped with fresh dill and pickling spices, and how she always sent me home with a giant jar of my own, but I wasn't really in the mood for pickle anything but myself, so I went down to Crystal's instead. There was a keg party in the woods behind her house, so I drank 2 beers, spent the rest of the night flirting with some karate guy I never met before, who showed me how to flip people, and actually did a move and put me down really gently in a pile of leaves, twice. He was cute, but his goatee worried me. Plus, my parents would probably have heart failure if I ever brought home an 18-year-old with 2-foot dreads and a giant F tattooed on his biceps. Yep, not gonna happen. Well, that's just great. While I was being tossed around by karate guy, Seth and Nutria the rodent became a couple. Sammy and I were standing in the courtyard when the rodent mobile pulled in, and Nutria and Seth got out. They held hands and walked over to her friends. "Stop staring," Sammy whispered, kicking me in the ankle. "Here comes Connor." And of course the first thing out of my mouth was, I thought Seth didn't want to go with anybody because he didn't want to get hurt again. And Sammy gave me this ugh look, but too bad. I was so freaked at the sight of the rodent flicking back her bed hair, and Seth smiling down at her, that I wanted to throw knives at them. Connor gave me a funny look. Yeah, well, I guess he changed his mind. Then he said his parents were going away for the weekend, and he was having a party, and we were invited if we could get a ride there. He lives in the same town as Sammy, which is about 6 miles from me. Seth lives 14 miles away. The rodent lives in Seth's town, of course. I hate my life. Chapter 4, Helen. I don't know if it's the waning daylight, or the inevitable withering of all things green, or the relentless approach of hunting season, but I've been getting up early, before lawn, tending the wood stove and brewing strong sweet cups of apple harvest tea to try and hurry the dawn. I sit by the window, and with Sarepta curled up in Hannah's empty chair, watch the pale sun top the trees, the cardinals and morning doves picking at the cracked corn sprinkled beneath the feeders, the does and their yearlings streaking from the pond, and beyond that, at the greatest distance, Hannah heading down her driveway to wait for the bus, There she goes, I murmur, and Sarepta's ears twitch, but she doesn't open her eyes, so there are no witnesses to the tears gathered in mine. I wave at Hannah's back, and it's meant as a greeting, but it feels like farewell. I wish spring was melting into summer now instead of autumn hardening into winter. I said that once to Hannah when she was 12, and she took my hand and pulled me out of my chair, led me outside and around the property, pointing out how pretty the sun was in the clear blue sky, the vibrant scarlet of the sumac, the fun of kicking up crunchy fallen leaves. We gathered pocketfuls of acorns, and like amateur Johnny Appleseeds, tossed them into the woods, picked catmint bouquets to hang in the pantry, and watched a monarch butterfly gliding on the breeze. It's a female, Hannah said, as it swooped low and fluttered around the few remaining goldenrod in flower. You can tell because she doesn't have those 2 dots in the bottom of her wings. I wish we had more for her to eat. It's such a long migration. She stopped and looked up at me. Hey, Gran, do you think she knows she's not going to make it? I don't know, I said after a long moment. Hannah nodded slightly and turned her gaze back to the butterfly, still searching the fading goldenrod for nectar. I think she does, she said softly. I think she can feel it, inside of her, like instinct. I think she knows she's not going to make it all the way to Mexico before winter hits, but she's trying to anyway. Why do you say that? I said. Because it's fall instead of summer and the air is cool instead of hot, and it takes longer for her to warm up in the morning just so she can fly because the sun isn't as strong, Hannah said. She has to use more energy to find food, and the days are shorter, so she has to find a safe place to roost before dark, which means she can't cover as many miles in a day as the monarchs who migrate in July and August can. She glances at me. You gave me that book on them last Christmas, remember? Yes, I said, and tried to smile, but couldn't. She looked back at the butterfly. She's brave. Valiant, I murmured, and the word was bittersweet. We watched in silence until the monarch finished feeding, and when she flew off, gliding to conserve energy, I heard Hannah whisper, Vaya con Dios, little one. And then, to me, do you think sending good wishes with butterflies is stupid, Gran? No, I said, shading my burning eyes and watching until the butterfly was almost out of sight. I think it's perfect. Dear God, I miss my times with her so much. The school bus finally crawls to a stop in front of Hannah's house. I watch her board, then make my way back to the kitchen to coax a second cup of tea for the leaves in the filter, open the kitchen curtains, and set up the coffee pot so all Lon has to do when he wakes is come down and turn it on. He surprised me with that small kindness back when we were first married, and we've been doing it ever since. Making coffee isn't a difficult task, not a task at all really, especially not for a part-time waitress. But this morning I go through the motions, hating the way my hands shake. This weakness that comes and goes at will, the muscle cramps, the way my feet have taken to twitching like those of a cat in the throes of a dream. If it was earlier in the season, it would have gathered my wild skullcap and experimented with brewing a tea. And if money wasn't so tight, I would do as natural my healing books suggest and buy blueberries for the antioxidants, pineapple for the enzymes, and cashew butter for the proteins and B vitamins. I would try supplements like glucosamine and chondroitin for my aching joints, grapeseed extract to help circulation, and maybe even ginkgo to strip the fuzziness from my thoughts. But money is tight, and while we're not going to starve, for the first time ever, I regret having given away all those tomatoes, peppers, and zucchinis this summer, instead of making myself can or freeze them. I only preserved half of the crop this year because canning alone wasn't nearly as fun as canning with Hannah for company. And so now I'm grateful that we still have as much fresh, good food stocked in the pantry as we do. I'm still not ready for winter. I hate driving to work in the snow, the slick roads and the icy steps, hate having to walk the dear path alone in the cold gray dusk, and the long bleak days with no company but my own thoughts. And I worry about the heat. Lon can't fell the dead trees or cut, split, stack wood like he used to, but we need to at least 5 cords to make it through, and I don't know where we're going to get them. The house has electric baseboards, but the cost of running them has become too high, and so the wood stove in the living room will be our only source of warmth. We could buy a cord or two and maybe barter for the rest, find someone looking to make money selling firewood and offer him our dead trees, providing he splits our half of the wood too. I can probably stack it if I move slowly and don't push too hard. Or we could impose on Wiess, Hannah's father, to help, but I hate to do it. He works such long days, and what little free time he has left would be spent with his family. I don't know. I can't find an answer. I fix a second weaker cup of tea and return to my chair by the window. Sarepta opens her limpid green eyes, stretches, yawns, and goes back to sleep. The strays, I counted 5 of them out on the porch this morning, are curled up in the homemade cat condos on the back porch. Soon it will be cold enough to turn on the lamps set above their beds, as the clear plastic sheeting protects them from the snow and biting wind, but offers no real warmth, and the single-bulb lamps help chase away the chill. I'm so afraid of the day I can no longer afford to care for these cast-offs and orphans, and will have to make myself turn away and ignore them miling around here cold skinny and starving, begging and calling and never understanding why I'm not answering their pleas for help, never understanding at all why I'm failing them. Chapter 5, Hannah. Connor is all over me. I swear he memorized my schedule like I memorized Seth's, so I'm trying to avoid him without being mean. And all the same time, now that I don't want to see Seth and the rodent, all I ever do is run into them. There they are, kissing. There they are getting high. There they are walking down the hall holding hands. I give up. Well, not really. I just hate seeing her leaning up against him with her bed hair swishing all over her pointy little rodent face right there waiting to be kissed. I wish I had bed head and a rat face too. No, no, no. They sit at their own table in the cafeteria, chairs facing each other, her legs slid between his. Ugh! It's so bad that I can't even go in there and eat anymore. Love, I have decided, is hard. I slept over at Sammy's last night. Her little brother won't leave us alone as we were getting dressed for Connor's party and kept whining, "Where are you going?" But luckily her mother had a date and believed us when we said we were walking down to the diner and maybe the strip mall. Anyway, we walked to Connor's since it was only like a mile away. The love couple wasn't there, but somehow that made the night even worse because Connor kept cornering me with his hopeful puppy dog look, which made me feel bad because I just don't like him back. So right before we left, I ended up giving him a mercy kiss in the back hallway for like 1 minute. Then he tried to ask me something, but I checked my watch and was like, "Where's Sammy? We're past curfew," and I ran. Why do the ones I like never like me? Why do I always get the ones I don't want? Seth, you jerk, you give me a giant pain. Seth came up to me at school while I was heading for the bathroom and with this big cheery grin said, "Hey, I hear you going out with Connor," and I said, "What? I am not. Who told you that?" He stopped smiling. "Connor." And I said, "Well, he's wrong." Then Seth got this cold look and said, "Well, you better tell him that because he really likes you. And he's telling everybody you two are going out and now he's going to look like a fool." And I was thinking, how is that my fault? I never said I'd go out with him, but I hated the way Seth was looking at me like I was some kind of user, so I just said, "Look, I was with him for 1 minute at this party, and that's it. No big deal." That was the wrong thing to say. "Maybe not to you, but it was to him," he said snottily. And I was like, "You know what? I don't need this," but only in my head, of course. So I just gazed at him, dying inside, and he said, "Forget it, I'll handle it," and he walked away, like he couldn't leave fast enough. Now they're both ignoring me, but so what? There are tons of other guys here who flirt, and to tell you the truth, I like that best because it doesn't mean anything. It's talk, words, a game, and everyone knows it, and no one gets hurt. F you, Seth. You could have had me, but you didn't want me. Why didn't you want me? Well, that was fast, Sammy murmured, nudging me and motioning with her chin to the cafeteria table where Connor and his new girlfriend Teresa sat snuggled together. How long did it take him to get over you? 3 days? A week? Who cares, I said absently, because I had more important things on my mind, like what Seth and the rodent had been arguing about when I passed them in the hall this morning. It had looked bad, the rodent's face was red, and her tone hot and furious, and Seth had a distant look in his eyes like he wasn't even there, and I was dying to know what was up. Luckily, I didn't have long to wait. Sammy caught up with me between classes and seizing my arm in a death grip, steered me into a cove between the lockers. Nutria broke up with Seth because he cheated on her with that girl who broke his heart. Bailey? I said, wide-eyed. Yeah, I guess, anyhow, he's going back out with her now. The warning bell rang. Crap, I've got to go. I can't be late to Brother Gary's class, or he throws a fit. I'll call you later. She released me, turned, and took off. Well, I stood there staring after her for a minute, then turned and headed to algebra with a giant smile on my face. Seth had cheated with Bailey, the one girl who was bound to screw him over again, and when she did, I was definitely going to be there to catch him. My father got laid off today. He's union, and work always slows in the winter, but it's bad timing this year because of my school tuition and the heating bill and all. He told me if I needed money to buy Christmas presents, I'd better think about earning it, so I applied for a job at the pet store being a Santa's helper to the pet photographer. If they hire me, I'll get an employee discount and can surprise Gran with all kinds of cat stuff for Christmas. She's been on my mind a lot lately, mostly at weird times like in the middle of the U.S. history class or English, and I can't do anything about it. Like this morning, I dropped my scarf on the way down the driveway to wait for the bus, and when I turned back to pick it up, I got a clear view of Gran's house through the bare trees in the little woods. There was a light on in the living room, right where our reading chairs were, and I got this awful pang in the pit of my stomach, almost like being homesick, and then this really strong flash of a memory. You got right here in the nick of time, Gran said cheerfully as I trudged up the back porch steps. Here, I just finished making this for you. What is it? I asked, sniffling and wiping my damp cheeks on the back of my hand. It had been a bad Sunday so far. My parents had been picking at each other from the moment I'd woken up, and so I took the little red bag she offered without much enthusiasm. It was made of felt, the drawstring a thin white silk ribbon, trailing from the top, and when I looked inside it was empty. A talisman, Gran said, pushing herself up off the back porch step. Come on, let's go stroll the deer path and see if we can find anything to put in there. She explained more as we walked, told me how red was the power color for strength and confidence, and that whatever I chose to put in the bag should mean something to me, make me feel safe and happy or stand for something important. Okay, I said, crouching and picking up a smooth, round, and brown acorn. What does this stand for, Gran? An acorn is the seed of the oak, she said, so I would say an acorn stands for potential, growth, new beginnings, and that's good, I said, and dropped it in my talisman bag. Let's look some more. We wandered further, and before long the bag contained a piece of mica, fool's gold, Gran called it, because the glittery outside made people think it was worth more than it really was. A blue jay's feather for plainspokenness, a little stick from the catalpa because that tree was old and sturdy and weathered, a place of comfort and shelter, questions and truths. Gran and I had spent a lot of time sitting under that tree. I shook my head, smiling, and picked up my scarf, straightened, and on impulse, not even knowing if she was actually sitting in the window, raised my arm, waved, and then turned and hurried to the road to catch the bus. Seth must really be in love with Bailey, because he stopped me in the hall to supposedly say hi, but ended with showing me a picture of him and Bailey lounging out in our living room. She had on a really short, tight, low-rise skirt and an ankle bracelet, and was wearing this smug, totally cocky smile. I wanted to vomit on the picture, but only said, "Oh, she's cute," when what I really wanted to say was, "She has a nose like a bulldog and one hell of a lazy eye." Not that she does, but anyway. A senior named Wine has been sitting with me and Sammy at lunch and walking with me between classes. We went out to the courtyard with me wearing his jacket, and Seth was there with Connor. Seth was sneaking glances over at us the whole time, too. I could tell from the corner of my eye. I liked the idea of Seth seeing that somebody else might like me, so I flirted hard with Wine whenever Seth was somewhere in the background, and even went to the movies with him once to see if we could be more than friends. Wine must have been thinking that way too, because at the end of the night, he said I was cool but a little too young for him. Okay, but I wasn't the one snickering through the movie's love scene, was I? Still, word got out that we went, and Seth sat with me at lunch today. He ate half my french fries and even fed me one. I don't understand him at all. OMG, I can't believe this day happened. It was beautiful out, one of those freaky 50-degree mornings, and me and Sammy were in the courtyard before the bell rang when Seth got off his bus, stretched, spotted me, and started over. Sammy stepped hard on my foot and hissed, "Stop staring," and I managed to break the lock Seth had on my gaze. I swear with the sun on his hair and that smile on his face, there was nothing in the whole world but him. "Hey, stranger," he said, bumping his shoulder against mine. "Hey," I croaked. "Hi," Sammy said wearily. "God, it's great out here," he said, stretching. "Way too nice to spin in this dump." I said, but my heart was going crazy. "I know." He looked at me like he was searching for something, some kind of answer. He must have found it because he grinned and said, "Want to cut out?" "No," Sammy said, giving me a hard look. "And go where?" I said, ignoring her, because OMG, this was it. He shrugged. "I don't know, anywhere, just hang out and enjoy." "We can't," Sammy said, bugging her eyes at me. "We have a history test third period, remember, Hannah? If we leave before the bell rings, we'll be marked absent," Seth said. "And how are you going to get home then?" Sammy said, elbowing me and scowling. "We'll come back last period and hang here for the buses," Seth said. "No big deal." "Yeah, no big deal," I said, giving Sammy my answer with one burning look. She sighed, shook her head, and said, "Well, if you're going to do it, you better go before one of the teachers sees you," and to me in a whisper, "Call me." So we went. We just turned around and cut across the side lawn to the road, which wasn't really easy for me in heels, but Seth said, "Here, hold on to me." And we picked our way across with me, expecting to have a nun snag us at any second, but no one did. "I can't believe I'm doing this," I said, when we got to the sidewalk and we were out of sight of the school and could relax. "You never cut out before?" Seth asked, taking off his suit jacket and slinging it over his shoulder. "Nope," I said, "so I'm your first," he said with a mischievous smile. I blushed and gave him a hip bump. "Don't advertise it." He laughed, slid an arm around my shoulders, and squeezed me into him. Hannah, what am I ever going to do with you?" he said, and kissed the top of my head right into my hair. "Come on, let's go to the diner, my treat." That alone would have been enough to make the whole day worth it, but there was more. We got a booth at the back, ordered OJ and waffles, and while we were waiting for the food, I got all kinds of shy and couldn't even look at him, because I was afraid I would start crying with happiness or something totally geeky like that. "So are you still seeing Wine?" he said. I shrugged, and tracing the design on my placemat, said, "Are you still going out with Bailey?" "Yep," he said. "This is so bizarre," I said, shaking my head. "What?" he said. I think we should have done it a long time ago. Really? I drawled, because he was flirting. And if that's how he wanted to play it, then I could do that. What else should we have done a long time ago? His smile widened like he was thinking something delightfully perverted, and suddenly the air in the diner got hot and close, and everything else receded, and there was nothing but him and me. You should ask me over, he said. You should ask to come, I said, drowning. He nodded, never breaking the gaze. Yeah, I should. And then the food showed up, which was good because I had to breathe again, but bad because it completely changed the mood. He told me about his guitar and his music theory class and all these songs he was learning from the 60s on up, stuff I'd never even heard of, but made a mental list to download as soon as I got home. So are you in a band? I asked. Nah, he said, coating his waffles in syrup. I don't know if I want to get into a band or the studio side of it, like maybe an audio engineer. Right, I said, wishing my stomach would stop jittering so I could eat too. But all I could think about was that there we would go after this and what had to happen once we got there. Would he ask me out? Would he kiss me without asking me out? Would I let him? That would make me an affair girl, almost like a slut, and I didn't want to be that. But what if kissing finally made him realize he really liked me and, hey, cool, the cowboy junkie's doing Sweet Jane, he said, nodding up at the ceiling where the speakers were playing a slow, dark, heartbeat, sexy song. This song never gets old. The singer's voice was sultry, summer night hot, and Seth watched me playing air guitar and murmuring the lyrics like he was singing them to me. Is it possible to blue man die of love at the same time? Yes, because I was doing it, especially when I felt his legs stretch out on either side of mine under the booth and rest against me. I sat spellbound, watching his fingers slide over invisible strings, his hair slipping forward into one eye, and him flicking it back without taking his gaze off me. I don't think I even breathed until he leaned back at the end and smiled a slow, spontaneous smile that was real, that stopped time and erased place in a gray-smooth happiness so pure it was too big to hide. Good song, he said finally, breaking the glaze, picked up his fork. Yeah, I said, and slipped my trembling hands off the table and into my lap. I never heard it before, but I like it. He looked at me again, studying me like he was trying to figure something out. What? I said. Nothing, he said, glancing down and poking at the last hunk of cold waffle. Maybe I'll play it for you sometimes, if you want. That'd be good, I said, and wiggled my feet under the table. They bumped his legs, which were still sort of wrapped around mine, and he quickly withdrew them. Sorry, he said without looking at me. No, I didn't mean to kick you, I said, and I hadn't. My foot just fell asleep. We hung out a while longer, finishing our OJ, doing the dumb word games on the placemats, and then he looked at his watch, stretched, and said, You ready? Sure. I said because that was an understatement. He paid and lingered close enough so that everyone in the place would know we were together. He pushed the door open, and thanks to Wine holding the door for me, I thought Seth was holding it for me too. So I started through, but I guess he wasn't, because he started through at the same time. And it was really embarrassing because I'd already said thanks and basically ran right into him. He got kind of snappy and said, Well, go then, like I'd humiliated him on purpose, which I hadn't. I felt like kicking Wine for getting me used to guys holding the door open for me, and then Seth peed me off by saying, So I guess Wine's a real gentleman, huh? But he said it in this mocking voice, so I said, Yeah, he is. And Seth snorted and said, Well, I'm not Wine. And I snorted back and said, No kidding. Talk about a strange 10 minutes of walking. I was starting to feel bad and even panicky for blowing it. So what if he didn't open the door for me? And okay, so mocking Wine wasn't the greatest thing to do, but why did I have to get snotty back? Wasn't this chance bigger than one quick payback? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and stopped walking. Look, do you want me to just go back to school and you can hang out on your own? He turned and showed his hands in his pockets, ambling backwards and watching me, moving farther and farther away. Do you want to go back? He said finally. Do you want me to? I said, staying planted there by sheer force of will. He shrugged. I want you to do whatever you want to do. Okay, now he was peeing me off because I ditched school to be with him, and he wouldn't even give me 1 inch of a reason to stay. Well, good, then stop walking so I can beat you over the head with my shoe, all right? His jaw dropped and his face cleared and he laughed. Stop walking, I insisted, and bent to pry off my heels. The sidewalk was chilly under my stockinged feet, and I picked up the shoes by the straps and let them dangle from my finger. Oh, no, he said, with a mischievous grin. I'm no fool. Matter of opinion, I said, lifting my chin and walking towards him, blood tingling at the laughter in his eyes. Now stand still, you big chicken, and take your punishment. Girl, if you're going to punish me, then you're going to have to catch me and hold me down to do it, he drawled, still walking backward away from me. I'd like to hold you down, I muttered, swinging my shoes like I hadn't a care in the world. It threw him off for 1 second. I needed to lunge, but he recovered fast and, laughing, turned and took off at a jog down the street toward the little park. Pretty lame fake-out, he called back. It's what I do best, I said under my breath. Come on, you'll never catch me walking, he taunted. Well, then I guess I'll never catch you, Seth, because really I do look like someone who runs, I said with attitude. His gaze dropped pointedly to my chest and his grin widened. Hey, a guy can dream. Perv, I said, sauntering closer. You wish, he said, ambling onto grass. And oh God, I did. I wished for everything, for him and me together, for the right touch and kiss him, and for him to want me, even 1/10 as much as I wanted him. Darn, you're slow, he said, and with a cocky grin, headed for the swings. Not always, I thought, and taking careful aim, hurled one of my shoes. It grazed his arm, and he turned astonished while I aimed and threw the second one. If he hadn't ducked, it would have nailed him right between the eyes. Oh, you're so seriously going to pay for that, he said, dropping his jacket and loosening his tie. That's what they all say, I said, as eyes sparkling. He started toward me. I let out a shriek and, laughing, headed across the grass toward the slide, yelling, This is home! I call you can't touch me. But maybe I garbled the words because all of a sudden his arms closed around me in a tackle. But instead of driving us forward, he somehow swung me around, and when we fell, I landed on top of him with my back on his chest, his arms locked high around my ribs, and our legs tangled boy-girl. I immediately started to squirm off, and he tightened his arms and said breathless into my hair, Stop, relax. So I did, heart pounding, afraid I was too heavy, afraid he could feel the heat in my blood, the want in my heart, afraid he'd hate the smell of my sandalwood oil, my shampoo, my skin, just afraid he would find a reason to end it. He was breathing against my neck, warm, heavy breaths that smelled of maple syrup, and somehow I began to breathe with him, lying there on the verge of everything, eyes closed against the wide-open sky, body tensed and waiting, and little by little arms locked around me, eased open just enough to free his hands, leaving his fingers on my ribs, his thumbs nestled against the bottoms of my breasts, pushing the curves under the ugly blouse and the thin lace bra. And oh God, I didn't know if he realized his thumbs were there, or if he was doing it on purpose, didn't know if I should say something or leave it be, because he was breathing deeper now, breaths that lifted his chest and me on it, breaths that somehow slid his arms down across my stomach, and his hands to low-rise territory, where they settled on my hips, holding me without effort, sinking me into him, without moving, without him rising or me falling, just with the heat from where the back of my skirt pressed against the front of his khakis. And I think he felt it too, because he shifted beneath me just a little, but it was a reaching shift, an upshift that hollowed his stomach and tightened his thighs, and suddenly we weren't just playing anymore. I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't heard little kid chatter coming down the sidewalk toward the park. Crap, Seth said, releasing me and sitting up. Face burning, I quickly slid off him and became very busy smoothing my shirt and hair and skirt. I was so dazed that I didn't know what to say. Was there anything? Or how to act, or what to even think? Come on, he said, giving me a hand up. He wasn't looking at me either, releasing me fast and turning away, bending to pick up his jacket as I retrieved my shoes and purse. Where are we going? I said as we passed the mom with 3 kids heading for the swing set. H if I know, he said with a wry smile, and ambled across the grass to the sidewalk. I took a deep, shaky breath and caught up with him. It's the weirdest feeling walking next to someone you just laid on, and yet still being so careful not to let your hand touch his while he's being just as careful not to touch yours, feeling so huge and aware of how awkward it is, and that awareness makes it even harder to walk normally. Your face feels hot and fake and obvious, and you can't even decide if your expression is right. Nothing is in harmony, nothing is in sync. Look, don't worry about it, he said as we stopped at the corner and got ready to run across the mall. I mean, technically nothing really happened, so you should still be all right with wine. And then the light changed and he started to cross the road. I just stood there with the wind knocked out of me, watching him moving farther and farther away without turning to see if I was following, without waiting to see the effect of his words. Technically nothing really happened. Technically? OMG, my stomach. All these people stopped at the light, watching me stand there, humiliated and stricken. He made it all the way across and turned to see where I was. Hey, he called, shading his eyes. You coming? My heart was pounding in a hollow place, telling me to leave, to walk fast and faster, until he could no longer see me, and then to crawl into a dark hole and curl up and bawl, to pick up the tiny trampled scrap of pride I had left, and get out and wish I could say I did. But all I could think of was that I'd made a stand now. I would have had to leave, and my day with him would end, and he would let it end, and that would be it, forever. What happened, he said, when I finally jogged across, still carrying my heels, and with my purse banging against my hip. Nothing, I said, grabbing the light post for support. Put my shoes back on. Okay, let's go. So we cut across the parking lot to the mall, where, in a show of faith it could still have a decent day, I bought a pair of pants and a shirt on sale for like 70% off, and put them on so I wouldn't have to walk around in my uniform anymore. You got quiet, he said, while we were sitting side by side on the ledge of a giant planter at the food court, drinking Orange Julius's. What's up? Nothing, I said, skimming my straw along the top of the drink and sucking up the foam. He snorted. Right, every girl I know says the exact same thing when she's peed. And you ask what's wrong? Nothing. I'm not every girl, I said, swirling the straw around. Why do you guys do that anyway? He continued. Why don't you just come right out and say what's bugging you, like, Look, a-hole, you're really peeing me off. All right, look, a-hole, you're really peeing me off, I said sharply. Yeah, like that, he said, nodding as if satisfied, and gazed out over the food court. I waited and waited. Well, I said finally. He glanced at me. Well, what? I stared at him, incredulous. Well, aren't you even going to ask me why? I knew it, he heaved a sigh. Okay, Hannah, why are you peed off? No, forget it now, I said, insulted. You don't really want to know anyway. OMG, he said weakly. Look, I'm asking, so just tell me already. I swear I really want to know. Well, that's too bad because I don't want to talk about it anymore, I said. He stared at me, mouth agape, and kind of shook himself. Well, okay then. I looked at him. Okay, that's it. Are you kidding? Holy crap, he breathed, then started to laugh, caught my highbrow, haughty bee look, and tried to stop, but the more he tried, the harder he laughed, until he was bent over and spilling the last of his orange Julius all over the polished floor. You know, you're very weird, I said, trying to sound cold, but the snicker burst out, and oh, gee, it felt so good to just stuff the hurt away and go back to this. Yeah, well, look who's talking. Grinning, he slid an arm around me in a quick hug. That was the last time he touched me. And we didn't get personal again, either. We went outside and hung out on the wall of the cement planter against the building, but he was back to flirty Seth, cute but separate. Like he was holding himself at a distance, even though he seemed in a decent mood. I caught him checking out other girls, but I couldn't say anything, so I just started watching other guys. There were more girls willing to look back at Seth and disrespect me than there were guys willing to disrespect Seth, so that only made me sink even more. I hit rock bottom when a girl with a hatchet jaw and better highlights than mine paused and looked straight into Seth's gleaming eyes, stopped to bum a cigarette. She glanced at me. I guess she could tell we weren't going out and maybe she didn't care. And then I swear she actually eased in between us, perched a skinny hip on the cement wall, and turned her back on me to face him. Did he say, hey, you're blocking Hannah or anything like that? No. He just kept flirting with her like I wasn't even there. And OMG, I can take a lot of punishment and still keep my eye on the prize. But this was just so out of line that I didn't know what I would have done. Cried, screamed, threw a fit, and strode off in a huff. If a big gleaming black Harley hadn't rumbled up to the curb with a karate guy straddling the seat. Hannah, he said, pulling off his helmet and shaking out his beautiful poisonous dreads. He had on a black t-shirt and this rude ink was right out there for all to see. What's up? Hey, I cried, beaming and launching myself off the cement wall, totally ignoring the surprised silence next to me, and at that moment crazy in love with karate guy. OMG, where have you been? I pranced over and stood so close he practically had to put his arm around my waist. What a gorgeous bike, is it new? Turning my back on Seth, I gave karate guy an intense pleading look like, please play along, please. His gaze shifted past me to Seth and the girl, and then back to me. He quirked an amused eyebrow, stroked his goat, and nodded like he got it. Then he wanted nothing more in the world to play stupid baby games with high schoolers. I bought it because I knew you'd look hotter than hell riding on the back, he said with a lazy grin, twinkling at me and loud enough for Seth and the girl to hear. Whoops, he said, ducking as I blushed and slapped at him. Did I say that in front of your old man? My what? I said as if I had no clue, then turned and glanced at Seth. Him? Oh no, he's not my boyfriend, he's just... I cocked my head like I was deliberating, then shrugged and said, some guy from school. And I turned away again, stung by the sight of Hatchet Girl in her skinny-hipped, S-shaped stance, groin out, boobs level with Seth's nose, Seth's hand resting way too close to hers. Cool, karate guy said. Then hop on, I'll take you for a quick ride, unless, He glanced at Seth again, eyebrows high like he was giving him one last chance to step up. Oh no, he doesn't mind, he's busy, I said with a dismissive wave, as if I didn't give one crap about him picking up a girl while he was with me. I'll be back, I said over my shoulder, took one extra helmet, and squeezed it down over my ears, and karate guy, who seemed to be enjoying the drama way too much, waited till I climbed on, and then twisting around to face me, buckled my chin strap and tucked my hair in around my cheeks. And if that wasn't enough, he touched the tip of my nose with his finger and said in a low, mischievous voice, You want me to give him even more to talk about? No, you're doing just fine, I said with a wicked look from under my lashes. He laughed, which surprised me, as down at Crystal's he always seemed so cool to actually laugh, but it was good sound, and I loved that Seth got to see an older guy treating me nice. Later, dude, karate guy said, smirking at Seth and completely ignoring Hatchet Girl. I settled my hands low on his waist. He checked behind us and we took off. I glanced back. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. And Hatchet Girl gave me an annoying look like I was just too obvious and turned to Seth, who was already looking away from me. Darn. The bike was sleek and cool and scary as hell. Karate guy took me around the parking lot and out into the road. He waited for a break in the traffic, then said, Hold on, in a rumbling surge of holy crap power, gunned it. OMG, I cried, laughing as we roared away. This is amazing. First bike ride? He threw back. Yeah, I said, squinting over his shoulder at the road. Cool, he said, then enjoy. He turned off the congested main drag, then meandered through the side streets, shaded lanes, and out into the empty road where he opened it up and took my breath away. This motorcycle makes a very distinctive sound, I yelled at his helmet, in the spot where I figured his earshot to be. He laughed and shouted, "Never heard it put that way, but yeah, she does." And then, "So you into that dude back there, or what?" "Is it that obvious?" I said. "Yeah, you were looking pretty miserable. Glad I showed up. You and me both," I said, and squeezed him a little tighter. "Thank you," I laughed forlornly. "And how weird is this anyway?" "What, you and me?" he said. "Why not?" He wasn't serious. He couldn't be. "Are you serious?" "What would you say if I was?" And it was the smile in his tone that freed me, that took me one step past who I thought he was and delighted me with who he was being right now. So I said, "I'd say you have no idea what you're getting yourself into." "Suppose I said I'll take the chance," he said. I bit my lip and snickered. "Well, then I invite you to my 16th birthday party in May so you can meet my parents." The bike swerved, and cursing, he righted it and steered over to the curb, turned to give me an astonished look. "How old?" "15, same as Crystal," I said with a cheery grin. "What, did you think I was older?" Yeah," he stared at me. "I could go to jail for you, like right now." "No," I said airily. "You're what, 18? That's no big deal." "It is to the law," he said. "That's dumb," I said. "First of all, everybody knows girls mature faster than guys, and second, you haven't done anything but give me a ride." He gave me this look, half amusement, half disbelief, and shook his head. "You're going to get me in trouble, girl." And then his eyebrows rose like he'd just thought of something else. "Isn't this a school day?" "Mm-hmm," I said, but it was no nice, so we cut out. "Oh, come on, let me get you back to Romeo." "Wait," I said, tugging on his dread. "Does this mean you're not coming to my birthday party?" He laughed. "Ask me again when you're 18. "You got it," I said, and smiled because he was making it so easy to like him. When we got back to the mall, not only was the cement planter where we'd been sitting abandoned, but the bag with my uniform in it was gone too. "Looks like the lover boy got peed and left," he said as the bike idled at the curb. "Now what?" "I don't know," I said, panicking. "I mean, I don't care about him, but OMG, where's my uniform?" "Think he took it with him?" "No," I said immediately. I think he would have said, "I'm not babysitting her crap," and left it there. OMG, my father's going to kill me if I lost that uniform. I hopped off the bike and ran over to see if maybe he tucked the bag down inside the planter. Nothing. Then I ran to the garbage can and tried to look in. I couldn't see, so I had to lift the whole top off, which was humiliating, but there was no bag in there either. "OMG, where is it?" I said, stopping and staring around the parking lot. Karate Guy glanced at his watch. "I have to be at work in 45 minutes, Hannah, but I don't want to just leave you here." "What do you want to do? Kill Seth? Kill him?" "Can you give me 5 minutes?" I said, wringing my hands. "Let me just run in and see if maybe somebody left it at the Lost and Found, please." "Go ahead," he said, and cruised over to the parking space. I ran to the first counter at Macy's and asked if anyone had turned in a bag. No. Bolted down the center of the mall, not even looking for Seth, and was almost past the food court when someone called "Hannah." I skidded to a stop and spotted him alone at the table. Frowning, I scanned the area but didn't see my bag. "What are you doing in here? Where's my stuff?" He leaned back and shrugged. "Isn't it out there where you left it?" "No, I only left it because I thought you'd watch it," I said. "Seth, my uniform's in there." He looked at me, eyes cool and face expressionless. "Well, you weren't too worried about it when you left, so I figured." He shrugged again and glanced over to the pizza place where a hatchet girl was in line. "Try Lost and Found. They probably haven't." I couldn't even begin to say what I wanted to, because if I did, I would have hit him, cursed him out, or burst into tears, probably all three. So I just whirled around and ran to Lost and Found, where, yes, the bag was waiting. I took it and ran back past the food court, past him and Hatchet Girl, through Macy's, and out to Karate Guy, who, good as his word, was leaning against his bike waiting. "Can you drop me off at home?" I asked. "I'll give you gas money, I swear." He surveyed my face. "Guy's an a-hole, huh?" I nodded, near tears. "Sure," he said. "Climb on. And don't insult me with the money thing, okay?" So I did, and he got me home before noon. My mother wasn't there, so she was over at Grant's. I changed into sweats and crawled into bed, and when she came in I told her I'd felt sick all morning and had stayed in the bathroom, never even went to homeroom, and finally got a ride home. I said I had a bad stomachache, which I did. But I must have looked like H, because instead of asking me all kinds of questions, she blamed it on the homemade sun-dried tomatoes she put in last night's salad, told me to rest, brought me a cup of hot tea with honey, and left me in peace. Sometimes my mother's so good. I saw Seth coming toward me down the far end of the hall the next day, and I could tell by the slow way he was walking that he didn't really want to run into me, so I just took the side staircase and problem solved.